Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our webinar today. It's brought to you in association with this year's Agile Business Conference. This is first of a series of pre-conference webinars, and we're delighted to invite our presenter today, who's Michael Short, Chief Operating Officer for Radtac. Radtac is our platinum sponsor of the Agile Business Conference this year. They're a specialist in Agile methods, providing training, consulting and software development services to organisations seeking to adopt and apply lean and Agile practices. The theme today is Cultural Change, Agile is about people. So without further ado, I will hand over to Michael.
Thanks very much, Alex, and thank you to Unicom and Agile Business Conference for giving us the opportunity to provide this webinar for people. So what do we mean when we talk about cultural change in organizations? Effectively, and agile change in organizations. What we're really talking about here is a transformation that is all around people. While we use processes and methods, it's all about the innate ability of the team. And that's why we've got that on the starter slide. So moving on as we can into the next slide of the presentation. Why are Radtac involved in doing this webinar? Why do we support ABC? Well, the key part of that is, you can see from this slide, is that we've been around for 16 years as a company doing agile change, and we have a pretty good list of clients who've used us and have experienced the benefits of agile. And importantly, in doing that work, we've learned to understand that actually it is always about the people, and it is all about ensuring that those people come towards the cultural change you're trying to attain by going towards an agile and lean way of working. And we believe that the experience that we have helps us to actually talk to this. And when we say talk to that, we also, as a company, have a business that is about introducing cultural change in an organisation where you're looking to do agile and lean transformation. So I thought I'd start with why are we doing the webinar, the purpose, so that everybody has a clear understanding of where we're starting. And the key here for us is that the webinar will address some organisational development and motivational models to produce a vertical slice of the organisation. So what I mean by that is, when you look at making agile and lean change happen in an organisation, it doesn't happen discreetly in one area. It doesn't happen without the total organisation's involvement. That doesn't mean that you have to do the whole organisation all at once. And that's why we talk about the vertical slice of the organization. How can you find something that is a top to bottom, a concept to cash, if you like, of how we deliver product within this organization. So that's the purpose of the webinar. And to show that we actually believe in, we just don't sort of put this out, we actually have a very strong why ourselves as a company. And that you can see is we believe in changing the status quo, and importantly, in the innate ability of people to rise to the challenges of their organization. So when you talk about culture and you talk about how you're looking to change organizations by introducing new ways of working and new engagement with your staff and with people who work with the company, it's very important to understand that that change and that ability to change comes from within. If you think you're going to have to replace large numbers of staff to produce change, that is for us not where you need to start. You need to recognize that actually you need to free and release the innate ability of people in their organization. So again, that's a Radtac why. And moving further on, and we back that up with our Radtac how. How do we do that? And we do that to look to achieve sustainable improvement, unlocking their human potential. And we value these values, if you like, evolution over revolution, collaborative partnership, pragmatic transformation, transformational leadership, over the other side of that coin. So it's sort of very similar to the Agile Manifesto. That's not that we don't believe that the others might not occasionally be required, it's just we value these on the left more. So that's how we look at it, and how we're going to go into talking about actually cultural change and actually looking at this particular webinar process. And when we looked at the Agile Manifesto, we believed as a company that there was a missing part. And the missing part, which relates to this webinar, is that of leadership over management. Why is leadership over management important? Well, we're going to the details of that later, but most companies seem to get very bogged down. The more established they become, the more that their business becomes a core business and they do less innovation or find innovation very hard. You tend to find that the management process dictates and is greater than the leadership process. And so we believe very importantly, if you're going to produce change in an organization, you need to recognize you need leadership over management. And the quote that we use that we think best fits this comes from a guy called Peter Senge from the Fifth Discipline. And he talks about, and this is very important if you're introducing change in an organization, it's not about everybody else. Without change on the part of people in leadership positions, is why many change efforts are doomed from the start. And we know from many publications, and again this was done last year in a number of reports by MIT Sloan, etc., and others, and Capgemini, that still we're getting a 70% failure rate in change process, and that's because we are missing that key value, the leadership over management issue. So when we look at that, why is leadership central to change? Why is it so important to making the process happen? Again, people don't resist change, they resist being changed. If you think about your own selves, your own lives, you'll understand what, if someone tells you to do something rather than tries to encourage you and show you reasons why you might want to look at changing how you behave, then you tend to sort of be turned off by that and you immediately resist that process. And it's the same in companies. You cannot manipulate people's beliefs and therefore their intrinsic behaviors. And this is the little simple tool that we use within Radtac. And the focus here is to look at actions. And the most important thing is to create an action or a pull within the organization around people, because people perform the actions. No one else. It's not a process, it's not a method, it's the people. And you need to encourage them to do little actions, and those little actions are actions that they themselves would self-perceive as being of such a size that if they refuse to do them, or if they seem not to do them, that would be, they themselves would define that's petty. And what you're trying to do is then look at how you create those actions within the organization. The next part that people, we believe within the company looking at is the results. People don't spend enough time looking at the results. The essay tends to be a tick box exercise. Oh, did we achieve that sales number? Did we achieve that improvement in cost? Without actually understanding, okay, that's what we actually got as an end product, but how did we get there? What was the journey of how we achieved that result? And it's very important that you understand how you achieved it, because that's the measurement. And it's good measurement and good understanding of how results are achieved that reinforces actions of success. It is understanding the how. This is where the empirical agile process fits in. It's that understanding of the resource and how you achieve them that is most important, because unless you do that, then you can't educate people, or people can't educate themselves about how to achieve better things going forward, because they can't inspect what they've done and then adapt the next action. Fundamentally then, what that does is create people's view on results that is starting to be changed. They themselves will look at results and they themselves will challenge their own beliefs. They themselves, once they've challenged their own beliefs, can start to look at their own intrinsic behaviors. And that's the way you get the virtuous circle of change in an organization with people. So how does this translate into actually looking at how organizations are managed, and I mean managed? Most of us, if we look at how an organization delivers, it is all about delivering what we're doing, our current product. We deliver it more efficiently, very much a lean process, and we need to manage a leaning process in an organization. We need to make what we currently do and what we've always done more efficient. However, if we want to become more effective, and the difference between efficiency is what we do today, exploitation of what we do today, effectiveness is about exploring and how you become more effective at delivering in the future. And those two things basically we put down as one is a managed process, one is a led process. The challenge is that the status quo is safe. It's how most people got here in the organization, and if we look at that, that's why we manage the process. 80% plus of the organisation are focused on management, and then less than 20%, and often this is 5% of the organisation, is focused on innovation. So it's a very difficult area to produce change and innovation, because the organisation is focused on doing what we've always done to produce what we always did, because that's where the bulk of the flow comes from. And you hear terms like, why should I change what is broken? And I'll upset colleagues if I start doing things differently. And also, we know that visioning is hard, but people follow leaders who have vision. So if you need to produce change in an organisation, you need to evolve the organisation, then we need to focus on how do we produce a balance between these two core concepts within the company or within the enterprise. When we look at looking at this process of producing change and looking at how people manage in those environments, we use a quite well-established model. We use a guy called the Stacey model on complexity and organizational reality. And I'll come back to how this fits into the model I've just talked about in a moment. But effectively, for those of you who haven't come across it before, very quickly, what it says is that when things are close to certainty, we know what we're trying to do, both in terms of requirements, what we need to get done, and also the technology or things we're going to use to enable that, then things are simple. As we start to move out from certainty, they start to get complicated. Not too far out from certainty, pretty close in really, things start to become complex rather than just complicated. That means that in getting anything done, there's a lot of interacting parts, there's a lot of different systems that are involved, not at different parts of the product and service provision. And so therefore we can start to see that in the modern world we get into complexity very, very quickly, and it's in the complex area that we need leadership. So how does that fit back to the model that we were discussing just now? Well, if we look at this, you can see that the way that Agile works is to break complex products or complex processes into simpler steps. So we do this, what we call sprints or iterations, whatever process you want to talk about. And if we overlay the map that we talked about earlier, or the diagram we talked earlier about, we can see that actually, as you start to look at how things happen, the innovation part is in the complex area, and where Agile works is it using short iterations to push people back into more of a managed state, because we're looking for how we overlay that in a complex environment, and how leadership plays in an environment of uncertainty is to actually lead the innovation and then provide leadership to the development of the unwinding of complexity and complication later on in the process. So that's how we look at it in terms of how we help companies to manage change in their organizations when it looks incredibly complex. We start by introducing agile concepts of incurring simplicity, prioritization, and looking at value delivery. But also when you're looking at individuals, when you're actually looking at how they themselves interact with the business, you need to start to understand, well, why are people motivated? What makes them get up in the morning? And we talked earlier about the why. Very important to have a why in the organization. Why am I doing anything? And that translates into purpose. And this is a model that is used by a guy called Dan Pink, and we use it a lot with our clients, where people, and this is where the leadership is really important to this issue, is they need to have a defined purpose. They must know why they're doing something. If the purpose of coming in is just to write code, or just to shift boxes in a warehouse, or just to answer the telephone and customer services, without understanding why those things are knitted together for the benefit of the customer, then that is where the first motivation, you start to lose a leg of the motivation. And as you can see, this is a three-legged stool, so you can't afford to lose a leg. The second part is that you must give people the skills. If people want to be motivated to do something, then they must be able to master what you're asking them to do. That means giving them training, giving them mentoring, giving them coaching, allowing them to fail, so allow them to try things and learn from their own mistakes. As we all know, that's an important part. So just telling people to do things and how to do them, you get a very unmotivated group. And finally, and the most important part of this is the autonomy. When you're looking at putting those two things of purpose and mastery together, that all works when you give people autonomy to actually deliver in their area of responsibility. So as you are yourself being given autonomy as a leader to get certain things done, the people who are delivering parts or sections, if you like, breaking down that agile into the agile model again, people who take responsibility, and they must be autonomous for delivering what they've been asked to deliver. So this is how, again, we can start to see all these different change in people tools and organizational development mapping fits into the agile toolbox. Moving from that is, we then talked about the vertical slice and how you make this work within an organization. And here we have a very simple model that we've published and presented many times upon about how we work with clients. And good change is about evolutionary processes, it's not about revolution. Occasionally organizations get to the stage where if they don't do something revolutionary, they are going to find themselves in severe financial difficulties. That's a rescue plan or a company doctor or a salvation plan for a company. What we talk about is horizontal stripes and vertical slices for organizations. That's a T-shaped person and a T-shaped organization. And where you add these values into the pink values into the agile values is to think, okay, if I want to deliver, if you say the layer 3 is the delivery stage, and although sometimes you can map these sort of layers, and those of you familiar with SAFe will understand the layer mapping, but if you look at layer 3 as the area that delivers actual products or services, then you want to have feature teams in this area where people from concept to cash are delivering across the organization in terms of its capability. And you also need that tied together capability so that you can deliver in a lean way and also reduce your lead times. And to explain this to organizations, for them to understand the leadership aspects of this, is that they need also to have a clear purpose at the top of the organization that must run through in terms of prioritization. So that's why we talk about the vertical slice in the organization. If you're trying to produce change with people, it must start at the top and it must run all the way through the business. And also at each individual sort of like layer in the organization, they must understand both the strategic reasoning for doing it and also how we're going to get there, the direction of travel. So if you want to have effective sustainable transformation, you need to have a vertical slice of purpose and change and understanding, as well as having an understanding of why the horizontal stripe or the feature team is important. If we look at this, I talked earlier a little bit about why transformation is unsuccessful, and again we sort of talk about, and McKinsey here have come up with a report fairly recently, again, the inconvenient truth about change management, and again even they are still finding that today 60 to 70% of change management operations still fail, and it's because people don't engage with the people. I'm just remembering a simple quote from there that I think it's 93% of people were enthused by the CEO or the CIO's communication around the change that they were going to do. Unfortunately, only 36% of people actually experienced the CIO or CEO actually standing up and delivering this repeatedly as their purpose for change. So people are very much affected by how you do or do not communicate and how regularly and how frequently you do that. When we look at this and we start to look at how companies interact, then we also think about, and how people work within companies, we must think about teams. Everybody has to work in a team these days. It's very rare that you can find an organization that can produce sustainable growth and sustainable business models where people are just acting as individuals and not within teams. And again, we help clients with something called the Lencioni model. We use that quite a lot. And what Patrick Lencioni does is he talks about the basic pyramid of delivery within a team. What are the things that prevent people from delivering? And if we look at this, you can see it's the bedrock of any team is trust. And if you're building, trying to build a team and there's an absence of trust, then you are going to fail. And if we look at how that translates, then we have that here. We focus on, again, on the leadership role in the team, and the principle is based on the need that the team must feel confident in the leadership, and often that confidence comes from knowing that those individuals are have an ability to be vulnerable and to be open to the fact that they themselves have failed. So in other words, it's, again, going back to the leadership point, you must show that you understand and you accept that failure and being vulnerable, which I've just noticed on the slide is spelt incorrectly, apologies for that, is something that is very key to creating trust in an organisation. The reason why trust is very, in a team, the reason why trust is very important is because everyone will have a different opinion. There will be a fear about rocking the boat. There'll be the fear around groupthink. There'll be the non-collegiate colleague. But teams that don't work and don't function well, and there's actually, if you look at the Bay of Pigs fiasco and then look at the Cuban Missile Crisis, how Kennedy changed, how he managed the teams in that situation is a good example of how conflict and a lack of fear of conflict, if you like, groupthink, is illustrated in how he then changed how he did manage those approaches amongst his teams. But that fear of not being able to speak up and talk openly about different points of view is the next thing that stops teams from functioning, because they get led by an expert or get led by a small group of experts and no one wants to challenge them. However, when we move on from conflict and we talk about those things that are most important to us, the next thing is the lack of commitment. They're often referred to, as we said in the UK, as cabinet responsibility. That means that if you've decided to commit as a team, then that's what you do. And when you leave the room and you've all decided to commit, that's what you do publicly. And if you don't agree with something, the whole point of using an agile process within a change approach means that nothing is set in stone for a long period of time. You are going to revisit your priorities, you are going to look at the results, again going back to that results review, and ensure that you are learning. So if something hasn't worked the way you wanted it to or did not deliver the value, there is going to be an opportunity to revisit that and to put into place an alternative approach. And that is something that is very important to get commitment, is that you're not saying to people, well, thanks very much for your opinion, but we're never going to come back to it. All we're saying is that as a group of people, we're going to try this course of action first. Now, the cabinet responsibility, you can Google it. It comes from if something falls in government and there's a vote of no confidence, then the whole cabinet falls, not just one individual. So the next part that's important is within the model is the avoidance of accountability. And again, this is not about blame, it's about the team holding each other accountable for the things they committed to do and making sure that everybody understands that it's not a case of I've done my piece. No, the team must be accountable for everything that's delivered. And I think I spent quite a bit of time at the beginning talking about the inattention to results. It is absolutely fundamental that people really, if they don't understand how you got to the result, then they can't really use the empirical process of transparency, inspection and adaptation to improve what's going to be delivered. That's fundamentally how humans work. They want to see the results because that is what changes their own beliefs. So again, what we do is focus on the 5 behaviors of successful teams. So we're starting at the bottom, trusting your colleagues. You need to have good conflict, team commitment, stepped up and being accountable and focused on results. So, it's passionate and unfiltered debate on important issues. It's then this commitment to the goal, that is, when you all leave the room, that's what you're going to do because you've agreed that's what you're going to do for this period. Okay? It doesn't mean forever, it means for this period of time. And also, as we said, the team must hold itself and the members accountable for its commitment. And the sets of results that we get, and I can't overemphasize this enough in terms of when we're talking about the team and what we're trying to do in terms of cultural change, is that the set of results are common. So in other words, everybody sees them, everybody understands them, and also they're well understood as results. So really we get to the end of the webinar. I want to thank you for your time. I want to, as importantly, just summarize where I think we've talked. We've talked about Agile being about people. We've talked about the empirical cycle and how Agile fits into the various tools that you can look at for organizational development. We've talked about PINK, we talked about Lencioni, talked about fifth discipline, Peter Senge, the learning organization. We've talked about some of these subjects have touched on the chimp complex, which is paradox, sorry, which is something else that we bring into our thinking, along with other tools. So it is, remember, all about the people. If you can't get people to look at results and take that first small change, that action that allows them to create a result that may not be the result they expected, then you won't start to affect their belief. And always understand that an organization is not about changing people by taking them away and replacing them. It's about creating the right culture in the organization that drives out the innate ability of the team members within the organization and delivers. So with that, I think we can finish a bit early and say it's time to perhaps take some questions. We don't seem to have received any questions so far, but I'm always happy to take if someone's got comments or thoughts on where we are, then I'm happy to say that. Someone's asked about the slides. If you look at the bottom of the presentation at the moment, you'll find them at slide share. If you look up Michael Short 1 or Michael Short Radtac, you will find them. There's two presentations there, and this one is called ABC webinar 3rd September 2014. That's the bottom, but that's the direct link if you want to pick that up. I'm just looking at. I think there are some questions, but I'm not seeing them all. Okay. Yeah. Are there any other questions? Alan's asking me a question. Oh, that's just Alan. Your question just disappeared off of my set. Right, regarding on the status quo. So Alan's asking a question regarding my earlier point on the status quo. How would you challenge a manager that sees changes being necessary from the level down? A very good question. The way that we do it is to use a number of tools that we set with the individuals, and we interview people about what they think is wrong with the organization. As we talk around the things that are wrong, as we talk about things that are wrong with it, we do interviews. So actually we then present back to the team that say that change needs to happen below them, their own, if you like, their own faults, their own issues, and actually clearly show them that their lack of communication, their lack of working is how it's causing the organisation to fail. And you need to start, and you need leadership right at the top of the organisation to make change really happen. You can always affect a team change. That's where a lot of agile changes come from. Let's do, a local team change. So we'll change the way we deliver software. We'll change the way we do BAU and bug delivery, or we'll change the way we do marketing. But it's not all joined together. Does that? Hopefully that answers your question, Alan. So we do that by reflecting back to them, interviewing them as a group, and then getting them to look at their own feedback. The other thing is often people just accept feedback from third parties rather than from a colleague, and that might also be another area. So Michael Caldo is, I hope I'll pronounce your surname right, Michael has asked, how do you lead people to actions if their belief doesn't support those actions? Well, that absolutely is fundamental to what we've found, and that is that you must find an action that is, for someone to refuse to do, is just in their own mind going to be perceived as petty. And that's why we talk about how important it is that you talk about people change alongside an agile approach. You need transparency, and you need to make sure it's very clear to everybody that what you're asking them to do is pretty simple and pretty small, and actually most people will then agree to do it, because to deny trying something, anything, is they themselves perceive as petty. So that's how we do that. You cannot change people's beliefs unless they themselves look at the results. The other thing you can do, that we often do as a company, is to do a results retrospective. So we actually go into organizations, we sit down and we look at their current process, and we analyze backwards, if you like, by doing something called a from the back of the boat analysis, critical analysis of what they said they'd do, what they actually achieved, and how they got there. And that's another useful visual tool, and we do a lot of visualization to enable that to happen. I think that's I think that's all that I've got in terms of questions. I'm happy to wait a little bit longer, or in fact, even if I felt that those questions have not been answered fully, then I'm happy to revisit them if the questioners wish to do that.
Thanks, Michael. That was an excellent webinar. Thank you again, everybody, for joining. As Michael mentioned, we will be making the recording available afterwards if you'd like to share it with your colleagues. And we hope to see you at the conference, Agile Business Conference, on the 8th and 9th of October. If you'd like more information about the conference, the website address is agileconference.org. Thank you very much indeed. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.